Yeah, I think for me personally, and like I say, just like everyone has to find their own path to happiness, to living the good life. For me, it had to be self-care.
Mm.
That has to come first. Just taking the time to really relax, to understand yourself, to appreciate yourself, self-care, self-love. Um, that's first for me. After that, one of I have like certain little, I call them little mantras or like little slogans, but one is be kind, be kind, be kind.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Pamela Curtiss. Pam is a retired teacher who taught in the Oakland Unified School District for 40 years, everything from preschool to high school. She served as a teacher on special assignment for 10 of those years, where she taught English as a second language to newcomers from many different countries. During that time, she implemented mindfulness and conflict resolution programs. Pam is a spiritual seeker, mother and grandmother of two little girls who bring her endless joy and laughter. Hi, Pam.
Hey,
How are you?
Broderick.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to be talking with you.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. I've said in the past, I know I've said it to you, I've said it to a lot of my friends, and I have an admiration for teachers. I have a soft spot for teachers. I think there's a lot of wisdom there from anybody who's spent 40 plus years educating children. That's thousands of young human beings to get exposed to and to kind of put them on a path to learning and development. So I'm very excited for this, and I hope the audience is as excited as I am.
Hmm.
Uh, Now I know I have that soft spot, so I have a little bias here, but yeah, let's jump right on in. I like to start off asking you to share a little bit about yourself, about who you are, how you like to for folks to know you. I know I just read that little brief bio, but tell me a little bit about you. How do you describe yourself?
Okay, I'm Pam Curtiss. I'm going to be 70 years old in March. I'm kind of excited about that. I uh, I always thought I would be upset about aging, but the only age where I felt like I was old and I went into a depression was when I turned 25, which is absolutely ridiculous. But for some reason, I was like, I'm a quarter of a century, I'm getting old. When I hit 60, I was like, wow, I made it, you know? And, I just feel so blessed to have had so many years on this beautiful planet, getting to know so many beautiful people. I was born and raised in Berkeley. So, by parents who were very active socialists, pacifists, really active in the civil rights movement, and really stressed being of service and caring for all people. So that became my core value. Where the problem came in was I didn't include myself in
Mm,
that care. So I was caring for everyone else, and I'd get all kinds of, oh, you're such a wonderful, kind, loving person, you're so great. But I didn't feel that way. It was kind of like, people talk about the imposter syndrome. Oh, yeah, you think I am because this is what I'm showing the world, but internally I'm like really screwed up. But I was fortunate in that I didn't get caught up in what so many of my friends and relatives did in the 60s in Berkeley, especially the whole drug scene. I didn't
mm,
have my first drink of alcohol until I was 22, and I steered clear of drugs because I was always afraid that I felt like I was like on this balancing beam, sanity on this side, insanity on that side, and that something like drugs could like put me over the edge, and I'd never come back. And my lot of alcoholism in my family and around me, and I saw what it did, and then I saw what it was doing to so many of my friends with overdoses and just totally messing up their lives. So I stayed on a straight and narrow path. I went to college, I graduated, I became a teacher. I come from a whole family of educators, so that was kind of natural. And I always loved teaching. When I was a kid, I was teaching the younger kids. And when I was in high school, I volunteered in a school for special needs kids, and I just fell in love with them. So that was wonderful. And I loved teaching. I loved children. Then I had two of my own children. I loved them madly. But there was still this internal emptiness and loneliness and very low self-esteem. But one thing that I really want to stress as far as living a good life is to be a lifelong learner and to keep seeking and not to just give up. If you're, there's other times in my life when I've really struggled with depression and anxiety, but there are so many resources out there now. And that,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that helped me was being able to say, I need help. I
Mm-hmm.
was always fiercely independent. I can do it on my own. I don't need help. I was ashamed to admit that I needed help. But when I finally said, I can't, I can't do this. I need help, and really reaching out, and the resources were there. Um, when I was always seeking. I mean, when I was a teenager, transcendental meditation was like really popular, and I was like, oh, I want to go get my mantra, and I went to like the informational session, and at the end they're like, and to get your own personal mantra, it's only going to cost you $1,000. I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. Then when I was in college, my family always thought I was really weird, but I loved being in encounter groups. That was another big thing. You get in there, you sit in a circle, and you hug each other, and you talk about what your deepest desires, and taking yoga classes and walking in nature. And I had this beautiful yoga teacher. She was such a healer. And I, I was with her for about 4 years. And I wanted her to be my mom. I wanted, I've had several times, my mother was a wonderful person in many ways. Both of my parents were. They were very good people. And our home, was kind of like Leave It to Beaver, where outside people, my friends were always so envious. There were 4 kids. My parents were teachers. Dinner was on the table at 6:30. We had these vacations everywhere. We'd go to Yosemite. We'd go to Russian River. The holidays, we'd do them up big, but very little emotional connection. I
Mm-hmm.
think my parents came up, in their own dysfunctional families during the Depression. Things were very hard. They never really connected with their parents, and so they weren't able to give that to us. And so I was always like my sister, I would beg her, can I just sleep at the bottom of your bed? I just wanted some kind of human touch. and and when I became a teenager, I became very promiscuous because that's the only way I knew to get affection. I knew if I had sex with somebody, at least they would touch me for a short time,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously led to all kinds of problems. Um, but I had this teacher, and she would say, at the end, she would turn down the lights, and she'd have us, lie down, and she'd take us through like this beautiful visual meditation, and I never wanted to get up. Like I wanted to sleep there because I felt so relaxed. And she would have us get into the position of the child, and I would go into the position of the child, and she's like, Ask your inner child what she wants, what she needs, how she feels. I was like, are you crazy? I was never a child. I was always a little adult. I was always very worried. In kindergarten, I would tell the kids, be quiet so the teacher doesn't yell at you. It's like this constant, I was like 8 years old and I'd be like, I'll never be happy until there are no starving, sad children in the world. You know, Now that sets you up for never being happy, right?
Right.
So she'd have us get into the position of the child. And eventually, my little girl started talking. And she said, you're so nice and kind and loving to everybody but me. Nothing I do is ever good enough. You're always angry with me. You're always yelling at me. And oh, God, I just started crying. And I was like, wow, I never realized that. What can I do to love that little girl in me?
Mm-hmm.
Because and I think this is what happens so often. Like, I don't believe in going into therapy and going on and on and on for years and years about what your parents did to you. I think that's like a waste of time. It's counterproductive. Your parents did the best they could. But I think we do have to understand that those years, those early years, are so critically important in our development. So if we don't receive that love and attention, affection in those years, we're always seeking it somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people turn to drugs. There's sex, there's things that we reach out to try. I want to grasp whatever kind of happiness I can get. And that was something I didn't understand, the difference between pleasure and happiness. You can have momentary pleasure, but it's going to disappear whenever that vice that you're using is giving you that pleasure. Whereas true internal happiness has to be unconditional.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a turning point for me in my 40s when I was really sinking. My marriage was falling apart. I was depressed. I was anxious. I had actually gone on an antidepressant for a few years, which I'm totally anti-medication, just because I couldn't cope. And a friend of mine said, I got this book for Christmas. I'm not going to read it, but I think it might be helpful for you. You might, you're a reader. And it was The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. And I read that book and I was like, whoa, this is my spirituality. This is so close to what I believe. And just him giving this, the recipe for happiness, it's an art. It's something to be practiced. If you're filling your mind, if you're watching the news every day and you're seeing all the depressing things and you're talking to people that are angry and depressed, and I was in a cycle of complaining and gossiping with my friends and sisters, you fill your mind with that, then obviously you're not going to be happy. But if you fill your mind with the positive, like what you're doing here with this podcast, and do the things that bring you joy. I love to sing, I love to dance, I love to take walks in nature, I love playing with kids. There's so many things. But when I start sinking down into a depressive or anxious state, it's just all about survival. I can only put one foot in front of the other. And I forget about all the things that bring me joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I never learned self-care. My daughter, I'm like amazed by her, because when I became a mom, and I'm a teacher and a mom, I don't have time for anything else because I've got to take care of these kids. Whereas my daughter would be like, okay, Mom, I'm going out for a yoga class, and yeah, I'm going to close the door now. You take the kids, and I'm doing my exercise in here. I'm going to have some meditation time. Like, wow, I could have done that when I had kids. That never occurred to me. It was just like, I have to be vigilant. I have to always be on. I have to be productive. So I started reaching out. I'm like, okay, I can try to find some Buddhist centers, monasteries, and start learning about this. And I started going to retreats. My first retreat was a metta retreat, which was like amazing, amazingly healing for me. And they start off, it's loving kindness, and you offer loving kindness first to yourself. And that's something that they always stress in Buddhism, self-love. You have to love yourself. You have to care for yourself. If you don't, you can be of service, but you will burn out.
Mm-hmm.
And you may end up with pretty severe mental illness if you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and you're not taking care of yourself. So I started going and I started meditating and I started going to the Dharma talks and, joining a Sangha, a community of people who were loving and caring and struggling with the same struggles that all human beings go through. And finally I was like, whew, exhale. This, and one of the things I would say all the time, I can take all the time I need to relax. This is one of the things I have to repeat to myself. I can take all the time I need to relax. And that was like a completely foreign concept to me. In fact, the first time I had alcohol, it was my 22nd birthday. My sister took me out and she's like, oh yeah, just have a drink or so. And I got a little drunk because it was my first time and I had no tolerance built up. And I remember thinking, wow, this is what it feels like to be relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
I had never in my life really felt relaxed. And that's why I always tell people, when you talk to kids about drugs and alcohol, you can't just tell them the negatives. You have to tell them the positives. Because otherwise, when they try it, they're going to be like, my parents didn't know what they were talking about. This stuff is great. And it can be great until it's horrible and it totally destroys your life. But that was the other thing I would say as a teenager when all my friends were like trying to force me to do drugs. And I would always say, anything a drug can do for you, you have the power in your own mind to do that for yourself. But you've got to figure out how to do it. And sure enough, I was able to, my psychiatrist said, you can't go off this antidepressant because your problems are physiological and blah, blah, blah. And I never believed that. I'm like, no, I'm going off. I said, and it was hard because I was on an antidepressant that was very powerful, and a lot of people can't get off it. But I got off it, and sure enough, all the things I went on it for, the night terrors. I used to have these horrible night terrors where I thought I was dying, or I thought someone was killing me, and I would sleepwalk, and I would go to the phone. There were a couple times I called 911 because I thought people were breaking in to kill me. And I actually wrote like a note to my family, I'm dying, I'm sorry, I'll be gone. That was gone. Once I got into the meditation and the self-care, and when I'd start to have a little panic attack, I knew how to breathe. I never knew. I mean, there's like all these simple things. Breathing. When the yoga teacher said, most people breathe very shallowly. And when you breathe like that, it gives you the same sensation as if you're being choked. So I started to learn how to breathe deeply. How hard is that? How much education do you need for that? How much money do you have to spend on, how many medicines do you have to take? No, breathe. Once I learned the power of the breath, what a turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
Besides Buddhism, the other thing that has really helped me, and this happened before Buddhism, 12-step groups. Like I said, there were a lot of alcoholism in my family. And so an ex-boyfriend who had been very abusive contacted me and he said, I need you to come somewhere with me. I'm like, okay, where? So he took me to an AA meeting. And he said, I realized what I was, the problems in our relationship were from alcohol and drug abuse. And I sat there and again, I was blown away by the honesty of the people and the healing in the room. And I thought, oh, and what he said to me was, I said, I'm not an alcoholic. I barely drink. He said, no, I think you use men the way I use drugs and alcohol as an escape. I'm like, what are you talking about? I never used anybody. I've always been used. But I started going to Al Anon, and I realized, yeah, I was addicted to the addict. I became as addicted, and codependence, which I didn't know anything about when I started going, is also a potentially fatal disease
Mm-hmm.
because we don't care for ourselves, because we put our lives in jeopardy trying to rescue or save other people. High suicide rates, high rates of strokes and heart attacks, and that I got so much out of those 12-step groups. But again, once I had children and I'm teaching, oh, I don't have time for that anymore. I don't have time for self-care. I don't have time for anything that's just for me. I have to spend all my time taking care of my kids, my students, lesson planning, all of this. So, and it's just like any other addiction. If you don't take care of yourself, you can slip back into it.
Yep.
So that's, I stopped going to those meetings. I stopped having that community of support. And that's when I started going down. But that turnaround, in fact, that book, The Art of Happiness, and then another one that totally changed my life, which another friend gave to me, was The Four Agreements,
Mm-hmm.
Don Miguel Ruiz. And well, there's four agreements that you make with yourself. Um, Take nothing personally. I took everything personally. Anything somebody did, it's because I did this or that, or I'm not. Make no assumptions. Don't try to assume what somebody else is doing. Always do your best, which I had a kind of hard time with because being type A, pushing myself. But then I realized, no, always do your best doesn't mean run yourself into the ground. Doing your best might be resting,
Mm-hmm.
doing your yoga, taking your walks. And then the other
Mm-hmm.
one was be impeccable with your word. And
Mm-hmm.
that was a difficult one for me because, like I say, I was in such a habit of gossiping, complaining. And be impeccable with your word is speak the truth and be kind. Don't let angry, hostile words come out. If it starts to come out, pull it back in, or if you can't pull it back in, immediately apologize to the other person.
Yeah.
So that was another one, and that's where I say being a lifelong learner is so important to living a good life because we
Mm-hmm.
can get so easily into bad habits. And our human brains are such wonderful, amazing, I mean, what human brains can do, but they're also make it life very difficult because
Mm-hmm.
we do have that constant chitter chatter, questioning, which is hard to turn off. I
Yeah.
always look at like when I have had a lot of pets, and a pet would go to the hospital and have a surgery and come back and just still wandering around. And, we humans, like, oh no, oh my gosh, I had this surgery and I have this pain and I can't let go of this pain and it's just ruining my life. And then thinking about how here's this brilliant species that's totally destroying the planet. I mean, of course, I want human beings to go on forever, and I hope we can get it together. I mean, we're so technologically advanced, but socially so backwards. I mean, how
Mm-hmm.
are we still having wars?
Mm-hmm.
It's mind-boggling.
So,
So
yeah.
being able to turn off that constant chitter chatter, and it's not easy. I mean, every meditator will tell you it's really never gets easy. It gets easier,
Mm-hmm.
and there are times when it's easier. But it's so freeing to know that I don't have to be a prisoner to this crazy mind of mine.
Yeah. So yeah, you said quite a few things here in that introduction. I think I like it. I like how you touched on so many factors. You brought in some of your ideas about the good life, and also some of the things that you've gone through in your life, the challenges, the sufferings that you've had, and how through those you've gained some insight about uh, a lot of things here. I'm not going to try to summarize everything that you just mentioned. I think that there's a lot there, that a lot of wisdom you just shared in your personal experience. But one thing I wanted you to do is do a quick summary of some of your core principles of the good life, or what it means to live well. And you touched on quite a few of them. Can you just kind of um, give a brief summary of the main points of what it means to live well? And then you've already kind of articulated uh, why you think that those are important. But so I would like for you to kind of give a little um, say what the so those core principles are for you to live well.
Yeah, I think for me personally, and like I say, just like everyone has to find their own path to happiness, to living the good life. For me, it had to be self care. I had
Mm-hmm.
that has to come first. Just taking the time to really relax, to understand yourself, to appreciate yourself, self care, self love. That's first for me. After that, one of I have like certain little, I call them little mantras or like little slogans, but one is be kind, be kind, be kind. There was and I'm always looking, like, being a seeker, a spiritual seeker, whatever that means to you, educating yourself and not in, like, I have a friend who never went to college, but she is the most educated person I know. And this is what I
Mm-hmm.
always tell my students too, especially like in high school, and they'd be like, "Oh, school's so boring." Like, then educate yourself. What are you interested in? What do you want to learn about? And if high school really isn't working for you, at 16, you can go to community college and take whatever classes you want to take. You don't, high school, traditional high school doesn't work for a lot of kids. But really, just seeking out the resources, the wisdom, learning from people, reading books, listening to podcasts, whatever it is. Just, but being kind. Another one I always use for myself and others is keep your heart and your mind open. It's real easy to close down. It's real easy to shut down. And I think, during the pandemic, a lot of us shut down. And a lot of people are having a hard time kind of re-engaging in the world. It was kind of just go into hibernation. I'm safe here. I don't want to have to, take a chance on getting viruses, and I don't want to, deal with the crime that's happening, or whatever. It's easy for that to happen, but when we isolate like that, it just leads to more anxiety and depression. And it just lets that chitter chatter of the mind just go crazy. So, really, for me, that is like so important. And another one I use is problems have solutions. There's a Stevie Wonder song, and that's his problems have solutions. Trust and you will know. And tapping into not only the outer wisdom, but the inner wisdom we all have. Like, we really have the wisdom of the ancestors within us, but we just don't know how to tap into it.
Mm-hmm.
And finding ways to tap into that, I think, is so important. The thing about the kindness, there was this kindergarten teacher that I worked with, Stephen Davis, who just was amazing. I loved him. I wanted to be a kindergartner in his class. And he had 3 rules posted in his classroom. And those 3 rules were be kind, be kind, be kind. And I thought it was kind of cute at first. And I thought, yeah, right, you got to have more rules than that. We're kindergartners. But when I really delved into it, I'm like, that covers everything. You're kind to yourself. You want to learn. You want to get an education. You want to be a friend to others and have, be respectful to people. You're kind to your teacher. You're going to listen and respect your teacher. You're kind to your friends. You're not going to hit them or hurt them. You're kind to the materials. You're not, going to tear things apart and bust up things. So that was like, whoa. And that's another thing that I'm saying. It's like, so much of this is like so simple. It's not, in all the years, and I spent my whole life either as a student or a teacher or both. But I was never taught any of this. You know, my parents didn't understand it. They, and I when I first started going to like Buddhist centers, and they'd be like, well, when this Lama came here, he realized that Americans have a very difficult time with their emotions, controlling their emotions. They're just pulled, here and there, and you know, they cry very easily, and they get very depressed and very anxious. And it's like, so I got to find different ways to reach them because they weren't raised in a tradition of calmness and meditation and self-care, and it's true. When I first started doing yoga as a teacher, I couldn't call it yoga. I had to call it relaxation exercises because there would be an uproar. Yoga? Oh my gosh, you're bringing in these weird religions in here. I'm like, no, we're just exercising. And how powerful it was when I was able to bring in mindfulness into the schools. And so it's so wonderful now because it's like mainstream now. Everybody's doing mindfulness. Not everybody, but a lot. But it was so wonderful to just take that time every day with the kids. And there were times, there was the administration didn't like it because they'd come in and like, you're not doing anything productive here, and you're supposed to be on page 12 of the math book or whatever. I'm like, yeah, we're doing that too, but this is an important time.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped the kids and it helped me. Like if I would start, many times kind of losing it in the classroom or, getting a little angry or whatever, and there'd always be a kid that would say, breathe, Miss H. Breathe. I'm like, I don't want to breathe. I want to. But how powerful if we start raising our children that way, as opposed to spending 40 years in misery and then discovering, oh, there's these simple things I can do to make myself happier and make myself more peaceful. And so that just be kind, just, keep your heart open, that, and, and not only make no assumptions, but what I do now is I assume good intent. I think most people really are caring people. They really, well, in Buddhism, what they say is you're born with a Buddha nature, this beautiful Buddha nature. And then what happens to you once you're out in the world, you kind of lose it. And then you've got to try to figure out how to get back to it.
Mm-hmm.
But that people want to be loving, they want to be kind. I don't anymore. I used to make too many excuses for people, and I used to put up with abuse because I would excuse it. I don't do that any longer. Now it's like, I love you from a distance, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to subject myself to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I was so codependent, and I was really bullied a lot when I was a kid, and there was this one boy in middle school. I don't know why. It's somehow they can sense who are the people that you can push around and aren't going to push back. But he would come up to me and slap me and open my purse and take money out of it and just do really horrible things to me. And for some reason, I was worried about him because I thought, what has he gone through to get there? Why is he like this? Something happened to him. He must have been abused. Well, that's a wonderful way to look at it, okay? But it's not great if you allow that abuse to continue.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I went so far, and this, I was always very kind of melodramatic in my own mind. I had like this fantasy world. But I thought, I'm going to put a note in my pocket that if you find me murdered, it wasn't Greg, the one who had been abusing me.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from? You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's extremely low self-esteem. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
protect him, even if it goes so far as I die doing it, you know. But that was my mixed up mind, the mixed up signals, that I received. Everyone's life is worth more than mine.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy of being cared for.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't feel you're worthy of being cared for and you're not caring for yourself, you're going to attract people that are not going to care for you.
Yeah.
And then that cycle just continues.
Yeah. I like that. I like how you, and you ended with this too, you preface the importance of self care um, as a primary part of living well, so that not only can that it allows you to do other things, but the thing that you also stress is being kind. And being kind is suggesting that there's this value that you give to others that is important. But in order for you to do that, I know this is my interpretation of what you're saying, is to be, in order to do that effectively and most effectively, is when it comes from a place of self care, it comes from a place of love for yourself, kindness towards yourself. It's going to help. It's going to help you be even more kind, more loving towards others. If
Mm-hmm.
you have that self-care part, because sometimes someone may interpret that as, why self-care, that's selfish.
Right,
No,
right.
but from your experiences where you had that you have packed so far, is you've had challenges, you've allowed yourself to be, you put yourself in situations where it was unhealthy, you were not taking care of yourself. So it limited your capacity to care for others or to be kind towards others in a
Mm-hmm.
way
Mm-hmm.
that that you would have liked to do, if I
Mm-hmm.
said that correctly.
Mm-hmm. 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 Right.
And with it leads to gossip, it leads to all of these other things, and then
Mm-hmm.
that makes your life more miserable until you start to, as you've done, go on a path of self care, self exploration, educating yourself, finding out all these tools to help you um, regulate your mind, put you in touch with your emotions. All
Mm-hmm.
of those things, from what you're saying, and I believe this, um, it has allowed you to see with a little more clarity others. It allowed you to uh, enrich your relationship with yourself, which inevitably allowed you to enrich your relationship with others and care for them
Mm-hmm.
more deeply. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and then finally, after having enough self-healing and really learning to love myself, I was able to then attract and find, a partner who is exactly what I needed.
Mm,
He's very loving, he's very affectionate, he's very supportive. My husband was, again, a very good man, but he'd grown up in a very similar family where he and I both were like the lost children. We were the good kids, we did right, but we didn't get attention, and then there were the crazy kids that were getting the attention or whatever. And so he was very, just like my parents, and that often happens where you pick your parent as a partner, very emotionally shut down, very hard time being affectionate. And so it was a very lonely marriage. When we finally decided the marriage wasn't going to work, we became very good friends. We didn't, we kept going to therapists saying, we need some help here because we're not doing well as a married couple. But, we have children that we need to raise and we're a family. And so, 2 years ago when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I went and cared for him. Even though we hadn't lived together for a number of years, we hadn't been physically affectionate for probably 20 years. And I remember when we went to a therapist at one point, I said, I worry that if he gets some kind of really bad illness, it's going to be hard for me to care for him because we don't touch each other. But it wasn't. I think because of the work I've done and the work we've done that he and I did on our relationship, it felt very natural caring for him, even to the point of having to change the diapers and, change the sheets and try to help him get in and out of a wheelchair. And it was, and, everybody was like, oh, you're such a wonderful person to do this. And I was like, this is an honor for me to be able to do this for him. We have a 40-year relationship. We're not a married couple. We're more like siblings. But how could I not care for him? How could I live with myself by just, and that's what, and it was exhausting. I went into a pretty deep depression after he finally died. It took me a while to come out of that. But I felt really good about myself that I was able to show up for him, that I didn't run away from that. And that's what we're missing, I think, in this country too. And traveling, that's another thing I think is really important for people to go and experience other countries, other cultures, how other people are living their lives. Like so many people from other countries come here and they're like, dang, you guys are so rich, you have everything, but you seem so miserable. Like, what's up with that? And then sometimes I'd go to poor countries and I'd be staying with families that had like almost nothing, but they're singing and dancing and hugging and cooking together and laughing. I'm like, wow, they have nothing, but they have each other.
They have
They have,
something. Yeah.
that's right. That's right. It's not the material. Like they said that Nicaragua was like the second poorest country in the hemisphere. Yeah, they don't have an income. They don't have money. But they have their gardens. They have their chickens. Everybody in the whole village comes and helps to build the houses. And I see that with, my son-in-law who's from Honduras. He's got this whole community of people. At any time he can call and say, hey guys, can you come? I need some help building something or something in the yard or my car, boom, they're there. And anytime they call him, he's there. And somehow we've lost that sense of community, that, really that closeness, the extended families. How is it that so often our elderly end up in some kind of hospice care with nobody they know around, just completely alone, that we don't have the time or the energy to care for them at the end of their lives when they cared for us as infants all through our lives. So yeah, I think that's another ingredient to living a good life, is that having people, that a community of people. And it could be your birth family, it could be the family you create on your own, It can be any kind of churches. I mean,
Yeah.
there are many ways of getting that sense of community. But I think for so many of us, we don't have it.
Yes, you're right. I think there is that's great that it's led to this community being in relationships with others, um, and how starting with self care, not necessarily starting with that only, but in this conversation, stressing the importance of self care so that you can be kind, compassionate, and loving. In that self care, educating yourself, learning. You brought up taking up different perspectives. That's going to help you in self care. I think the various perspectives you can have on the world. So traveling can definitely benefit self care, and I think it definitely benefits kindness. But you said something that's really, really, really important, that we in the United States, some of us that are outside of, especially those who are outside of religious institutions,
Mm-hmm.
do not have, excuse me, those types of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have community. Don't have a community or group of people that they spend significant amount of time with on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that's missing, something that is of value, that is having a negative impact on our culture and our society.
Mm-hmm.
And
Definitely.
yeah, one of the important things about for me about this podcast is allowing people who've had some experience, the elders, and that varies. But I want to allow this to be a platform for people such as yourself who've lived a long life, and I hope longer, of course, but a long life of mistakes, experimentation, learning that often doesn't get translated to
Mm-hmm.
a lot of younger people. A lot of people, I mean, a lot of 20-year-olds, if you're listening, I know sometimes it's really hard to listen to somebody older, but uh, at least the 30-year-olds are a little bit more open
Mm-hmm.
uh, to hearing what people who've had a little more life experience have to say. And I think it's important. And this has come up more than once on this podcast, the importance of being in relationship with others, having community, having
Mm-hmm.
those trusted people around us
Mm-hmm.
to feed us, and to give us something that is intangible. It's really hard to quantify. I don't even know if you. I don't think you can quantify it. You can't put it in GDP or some index of happiness. You can't even quantify that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that the like you said, the example of you're in your community, you need help in getting something done, and you can call up a group of people that are willing to come and help you take
Mm-hmm.
care of that thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you do see that a lot in communities that are quote unquote poor,
Mm-hmm.
is that
Mm-hmm.
they have each other.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's something about that is important, and something that reflects an aspect of living well. Of course, being able to feed yourself is a part of living well as
Right.
well. But that other part, we forget sometimes here in our material abundance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even the folks who are low on the socioeconomic scale have access to a lot of material abundance,
Right. Yeah.
but suffering nonetheless because we're missing these other pieces that we
Right.
don't stress enough in our
Well, and then
educational system, etc.
yeah. Well, another thing they talk about a lot in Buddhism is a lot of our suffering comes from constantly grasping something that's just out of our reach,
Yep.
and feeling like I won't be happy until I have that house or that car, or even it could be that relationship. That and that's the thing I think with traveling to other countries, it really helps you cultivate an attitude of gratitude for what you
Mm,
have. And that is another thing that I think is really important. I think because we live in a society that is ruled by capitalism and consumerism, we're always pushed into believing that we need to buy. There's something out there that's going to really make us so happy. And things don't make you happy. They really don't. I mean, if anything, they just like create more problems for you. I'm worried about what's going to happen to my car. I heard the alarm go off, and oh no, I got a scratch or a dent or, these like ridiculous things. Um, but being just grateful. And that was, there's a lot of things that have really helped me, but one is like keeping a gratitude journal. And every
Mm-hmm.
day, what am I grateful for?
Mm-hmm.
When I first started going to Al Anon, that's another thing I just always remember very clearly. There were like four of us women. Well, there was a bunch of people, but four of us that spoke. And one woman said, I have this beautiful child, but I've never been able to get my career going, and I won't be happy until I have the career. And then I was like, well, I have a career I love, but I've had three miscarriages. I don't know if I'll ever have children, and I will never be happy until I have children. And then there was another woman, and she said, well, I'm a successful attorney. I love my work. I have beautiful children, and I'm still miserable. And then there was a fourth woman, and she said, I have terminal cancer. I basically have no material possessions, but I'm happier than I've ever been in my life
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like really grateful for every moment I have left. And I was like, whoa, okay. It's not about what you're accomplishing. It's not about that you have to have this great relationship. That it really if to be truly happy, it has to be unconditional. It has to come from inside of you. I
Yeah.
remember the first time I heard in Al-Anon, they said, you can't go into a relationship looking for happiness. You have to bring it in with you. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, damn it, that was my plan. I was going to find the perfect guy, and then I would be happy.
No, it doesn't quite work that way, does it?
No.
And the things that, we have this, I'm glad you brought that up about consumption, because sometimes we think it's just the material things that we're desiring, we wanting that causes us problems. But it's also wanting pleasure that material thing could offer, but it's just pleasure in general.
Mm-hmm.
Wanting someone else to provide us and give us happiness. That's not what
Mm-hmm.
we're saying either. That doesn't work that way. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
think that there is something to having the material, uh, having some material conditions in place are beneficial to living well, are beneficial to happiness. I don't think you're saying that material things don't have any value. They do.
I
They have
think they're
some value.
beneficial to comfort,
Mm-hmm.
to being comfortable. I don't think happiness. Because if that were true, you wouldn't have rich people committing suicide.
Yeah.
Like if really, I mean, they've got everything, the beautiful home and the swimming pool, and they can take vacations everywhere. I mean, they've got every outside
Mm-hmm.
accoutrement, and they're still miserable.
Yeah, for sure. There. It's not adequate. It's not enough in and of itself.
But it
It,
helps.
but it
It
definitely
helps.
helps.
Oh,
It
yeah.
helps. It helps. And I think it's hard to be happy when you have bombs dropping on you.
Right. It's hard to be
S
happy when you're homeless and it's raining and you're cold
and
and yeah.
exactly, but just
Right.
having the basic shelter,
Right.
basic
Yeah.
things in
Very true.
place, and
Mm-hmm.
found some foundational things, so we can acknowledge that that's important. Yet, a lot of it is internal. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of it is what you can do now. Of course, we some of us are genetically predisposed towards certain things. So we
Mm-hmm.
didn't
Right.
choose our parents, and sometimes we grow up in homes where the parents are dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying you were blessed because your parents are just really good people.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they had problems, of
Right.
course, but
Right.
they were still pretty good people. Some folks grow up in homes where they're not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even still, there is a possibility. It may be harder. It may be
Mm-hmm.
harder for, I don't know if it's harder. That's not the best thing, but for lack of a better set of terms, uh, the challenge can be very great
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
someone who grew up in a dysfunctional home
Mhm. Mhm.
to find the means to internal happiness.
Mhm.
I understand that,
Mhm.
but it's possible, and I
Right.
think that there's hope in the fact that we can do something about our the quality of our minds, the state that we tend towards.
Mhm.
For each one of us, that's going to be different. That's
Exactly.
understandable.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we don't do anything to work towards uh, increasing or enhancing
Mhm.
our well-being, our happiness, the quality of our lives. So I think because I sometimes it becomes an excuse not to pursue personal well-being, for instance, or
Mhm.
self-care,
Mhm.
because well, I don't have enough stuff in
Mhm.
order to do it. And I'm like, well, you know, you can still do it. You
Mhm.
still
Right.
can breathe. You still
Right.
can be
Mhm.
more mindful
Mhm.
or breathe deeply or
Right.
various things
Take
that
a
you can do.
take a nature walk.
Take a
Yeah.
nature
Yeah.
walk,
Get out.
connect with
Yeah.
nature. Yeah, it's
I think that
possible.
that is another problem in our culture is that we have just paved over everything.
Hmm.
And we have like these little plots of grass or trees or whatever, or a few little parks, but we don't have connection to the earth. We're not, most of us, I'm not growing my own food. You know,
Hmm.
I'm not spending hours and hours and hours out in nature. You know, I'll take a 30-minute walk, but there's something, and that's why another reason sometimes I think plant life could be the most spiritual, because there's so many people that say when they go out in nature, that's when they connect spiritually.
Yeah.
And there is something just so healing and so like that's one of my another thing that I ask myself when I start taking myself too seriously, or you're not being productive enough, or you should be doing more. It's like, what does a tree have to do to be worthy?
Right. I
You
like that.
know? And I I don't really believe in direct reincarnation, but I used to think I'd like to be reincarnated as a tree. But then I thought I don't think I'm spiritually advanced enough for that because I like to be active and moving all the time. I don't like sitting or standing. Like I never had a desk when I was a teacher because I would never sit at a desk. So now I'm like, I think I'd like to be a duck because I could swim, fly,
Yeah.
and walk. How freeing would
Mm,
that be?
right. I love that. I love that. I think that's something we're coming to a close. I think that's great. Uh, the metaphor you use there to be a duck, and to be connected with nature. So I think you've touched on quite a few things here. A lot of things that I think that I know I can reflect on more. I'm very I appreciate you sharing your personal experiences, the challenges that you've had, and how uh, you're navigating or you've navigated those challenges, and how you're still on a path to you're still a seeker, still
Mm,
a spiritual seeker. You're still on a
mm,
path to well-being, to living well, to living a good life. And I think a lot of what you're saying here is it's a process, and it's a process of learning through education via experience. It's a process of overcoming aspects of ourselves that limit us. And it's a process that we're going to undertake until we leave this planet.
mm,
And I
mm-hmm,
think, and there's nothing to be afraid about when
mm,
we think
mm-hmm,
about it in that way.
mm-hmm,
So audience, it's okay that
mm,
if things are not perfect right now,
mm-hmm,
it's okay. They probably won't ever be perfect. But the
mm-hmm,
good
mm-hmm,
life is not about. The pearly gates, the good life is about being in the process, being in this process of living, and that wellness, goodness, these positive qualities, there's progress in it as we move along in the journey of
Mm,
life. So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
so we're gonna go ahead and close here. Is there any final thought? I know you've left a lot for the audience already, but are there any final thoughts that you would like to lead the audience with, or yeah, any final words that you would like to say, whatever you want.
Again, I would just really encourage everyone to keep your minds and your hearts open and to really give yourself the love that you deserve because we all deserve it and we all need it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, thank you so much, Pam. This has been it's just been lovely to hear you just speak your truth and speak your life experience. I think that that's where we really learn.
Well, and
My
it's been an honor for you to even invite me to do this. You know, when you first brought it up, I'm like, is he crazy? You know what? But it gave me the time and to really reflect on it and realize, yeah, I have lived a really long and wonderful life in many ways.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, and until the next time, I take care of yourself, and I just love you, and
Love you too,
wish
Broderick.
and wishing you all the best. All right, talk to
Take
you
care.
soon. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.